Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's professional development seminar on grading in Canvas. We're going to look at two things tonight. Basically, we're going to look at the gradebook in Canvas. That's going to take a while because it's got a lot of features, a lot of capabilities. I want to see how your grades get recorded and how you can share them with your students, and how you can use the gradebook to help you compute your final grades, and what the capabilities or lack thereof of the gradebook are in that regard. Then we're going to take a look, spend some time with the speed grader, the Canvas inline grading interface that allows you to pull up students' work, annotate it in many cases, comment on it, provide all sorts of different sorts of feedback to your students. And then, of course, assign a grade that will be automatically then placed in the gradebook. But we're going to start with the gradebook itself. And we'll cover all of these basic concepts here, starting with grade entry. How do you get grades in the Canvas gradebook? Well, that's quite easy. Let's see, let me go ahead and log in so I have a nice fresh login here. And I've got a grading sandbox here. I had that pulled up to the top. It's decided to hide itself. Just a second. Oh, where did that go? Huh. There it is. Okay. You access the gradebook in Canvas through the grades link in the course menu. This is a link you almost certainly want to make sure is visible both to you and your students. It'll always be visible to you, but you need to make sure that your students see it as well, because this is also how they will see their grades. But let's take a look at the instructor's view of the gradebook first. It's a fairly standard ledger table type gradebook. Each column represents a different assessment. In Canvas, that means either a quiz, a homework assignment, or a graded discussion. So each of these columns represents one of those things. Somewhat inconveniently, unless you name your assessments very carefully, it's can be difficult to tell what sort of assessment it is just by looking at the gradebook here. Like here it says, what could I do with screencasting is the name of that assessment, but I didn't name it to indicate that that is a graded discussion. The worst case scenario, if you forget what an assessment is, you can click on the name of it in the column header for that assessment, and it will take you to the properties page for the assessment, and you'll be able to tell this is a graded discussion. But it would be convenient if there were some sort of little icon that told you what that was, but that doesn't exist in Canvas. Okay, so each of these grade columns represents an assessment. Each of the rows, of course, as would normally be the case in a paper grade book, each of the rows represents a different student. Your students are automatically populated into the course and appear in the grade book as long as they are actively registered in the course. If they drop the course, they disappear from the grade book, though their records can be retrieved if you need them after they drop. So fairly simple layout. Each cell in the gradebook, of course, can contain a grade. And those grades can be expressed in a number of ways. Typically, it's a number of points, but you can also express them as percentages or letter grades, or checks or minuses if you're just checking something off. If it's not a graded assessment, but just a check off where the student either does it or not, has a satisfactory or unsatisfactory result, you can also set them up that way. That's governed by the settings on the assessment itself rather than any settings in the gradebook. So we won't worry about that right now, but those are all options. But typically what you see in each gradebook cell is a number representing the number of points earned by the student for that assessment, or little dashes, which means the student hasn't attempted the assessment. You may also see little symbols like this one, a rectangle with a little circle on the side that indicates that a grade or some submission has occurred. The student has turned in this work, but it's not yet been graded. And apparently it's something the system can't grade itself. So it's waiting for you to do that. And that's how you find things that you need to grade in the gradebook, is looking for that little symbol. So how do these grades appear in the gradebook? Well, in the case of quizzes, which contain only objective questions like multiple choice, true, false, matching, fill in the blank, things that you can give that you can inform the system what the correct answer is, can be graded by the system. So in some cases, these numbers will appear in the gradebook automatically when the student finishes the quiz. And no more Scantron sheets, no more answer keys, anything like that. You build the answer key into the quiz as you create the quiz questions, and Canvas will grade the quiz as quickly as it's submitted, and the grades appear automatically in the gradebook. You can always override a grade by clicking on the cell and just typing in a grade. I don't want to override that one, but I'll override this one here that hadn't been submitted. Let's say this student had some sort of dispensation to take that quiz on paper, and I know that they made a 5. I can just type that in and press enter. So you can enter grades just as you would in a spreadsheet, but that's quite a rare occurrence in Canvas, except in situations where you are grading an assignment that has been turned in on paper. And there's no way to have Canvas automatically enter the grade or to enter the grade in any other way other than to just type it in. Indeed, you can use Canvas the Canvas gradebook just to record the grades in a face-to-face class. If you do that, your students can then see their grades as soon as they're available. This is about the only way you can legally post grades at the district. Some people use Canvas just for that. It's got a lot of other capability, obviously, but the gradebook is something that many people use simply to post their grades to the students. By far the most common way of assigning a grade or of getting a grade into a cell in the Canvas gradebook is to use the so-called speed grader. And we'll see how to do that in a few minutes. The speed grader is Canvas's grading interface, and it will allow you to pull up the student's submission and assign a grade to it. And when you do that in the speed grader, the grade is automatically reflected in the gradebook as soon as you save it. So those are the ways you can get those grades in there. So where do the columns come from? How do you get those assessment columns in your gradebook? Well, mostly they are created automatically. when you create an assessment in Canvas, a homework assignment, a quiz, or a graded discussion, you can have discussion topics in Canvas that are not graded. But if you designate a discussion topic as something you're going to award a grade for, a gradebook column will automatically be created in the gradebook as soon as that assessment is published. So when you create one of those assessments and publish it so that students can see it, a column automatically appears in the gradebook. It is also possible to create gradebook columns manually with a little workaround that will allow you to record grades in the Canvas gradebook that were not actually earned in Canvas. That is, the assessments were not turned in Canvas and graded using the speed grader, but were rather graded on paper. They were turned in on paper, and you graded the paper and handed it back to the student, but the grade then can be recorded in the Canvas gradebook. And you can create a column for an assessment of that nature manually. I'm going to hold off on showing you how to do that for a few minutes, but that's on a later slide, in case you were wondering about, okay, well, how would I get a column in there for an assessment that I didn't implement in Canvas? That would normally be an issue only if you were using Canvas as a supplement to either a hybrid course or a fully face-to-face course, which many people do. Indeed, it used to be that we had more people using Canvas for that than we're teaching online pre-pandemic. Okay. How do we determine what order the grade columns appear to us in the gradebook? Well, there I've got some really good news for you in Canvas if you haven't seen this happen before. By default, these columns will be listed in the order in which they appear in the Assignments tool in Canvas. When you create quizzes or homework assignments or graded discussions in Canvas, they are automatically added into the Assignment tool, and they're added in the order that you create them chronologically. So that's how your gradebook starts out, ordered, with the order of these assessments here in the so-called Assignments tool. Allow me a moment for a pet peeve in Canvas. Canvas uses the word assignment very loosely. Sometimes an assignment the word assignment is used to indicate any assessment in Canvas. Could be a homework assignment, could be a quiz, could be a graded discussion. So, and at other times it uses the word assignment to designate a homework assignment as opposed to a quiz or a graded discussion. So you sort of have to take the meaning in context. And here in the Assignments tool, and typically when it's using the word assignment as the plural, it's talking about anything in Canvas that gets a grade, which means a quiz, a graded discussion, or a homework assignment. So all of those show up here in the Assignments list under the Assignments link in your course menu. Like here are quizzes, and you can tell what's what not just from the names, if you've named them informatively, but also from these little icons. The little rocket ship is a quiz. The piece of the document with a pencil is a homework assignment, and the two little cartoon balloons represent a discussion, a graded discussion. So you can tell what those are, even if they're not named in such a way that it makes it obvious. But this is the order in which the order in which you create these is the order in which they appear by default in your gradebook. But you're not limited to that. Reordering gradebook columns in Canvas is ridiculously simple. All you have to do, let's say like this quiz here, maybe I want that to be the second column instead of the second column instead of the third column. All I have to do is click on the name of the column, or the name of the assessment, and drag it over. And that's all there is to reordering columns in the Canvas gradebook. You just drag them and drop them. You can put them in any order that makes sense to you. You do not have to worry about confusing the students, because no matter what you do here, no matter what order your gradebook is arranged in, the students control the order in which they see their grades.
Dave?
Yes, go ahead.
So if you drag in Gradebook, would it change the order in the assignment in Canvas too?
No.
Oh, it won't change?
No. Once you make this change, this trumps, you should forgive the term, this controls it doesn't affect the assignments list, no. And the assignments list no longer shows you the order in the gradebook. That's just the original default setting. But I've got a student login here. Let me get into this same course and show you how the students see their grades. They also have access to the grades link in the gradebook, but it does not show them any portion of your gradebook. It just shows them their scores. They cannot see any other students' grades. And they control the order in which they see these grades. The default is due date order, which makes sense for them. They can see the ones that are coming up, you know, more quickly than others. They can also arrange them by what are called assignment groups. I'll define that term a little later, by modules, or by sorted by name. But they get to determine what order they see their grades in. You don't have to worry about changing the order you see them in. It's not going to affect the students in any way. It's just for your convenience. So, and of course, the gradebook is typically too wide to see it all. So you have to scroll back and forth. You have a scroll bar at the bottom of the screen. If you have a lot of assessments, you may be scrolling for quite a while. And there are ways to cut down what you have to, how much you have to scroll, and we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But that's the basics of how you arrange the gradebook. You can put all the quizzes together, or you can arrange things by the order in which the students have to turn them in, chronologically, or whatever makes sense to you, and it will not impact the students negatively in any way, even if you decide to change that from time to time. And Canvas will keep track of all that for you. Now let's look at some global settings that we can apply to the gradebook, some menus and so on that we have access to in the gradebook. We have this great, let's start with the gradebook menu in the upper left-hand corner here. That allows you to change the format of display of the gradebook for you. The Learning Mastery gradebook is an SLO-oriented grade display that allows you to indicate student competence levels in different aspects of the course and so on. It's not something that's used a whole lot, but it is available. You also have an individual gradebook view, which you can select, and you can select a particular student and see just their grades. So, and you can see their grades on any assignment. So this allows you to get a feel for how an individual student is doing without having to sort through or to scroll back and forth endlessly. Never found that useful, but you do have that option. Then you can go back to the gradebook at any time by using this menu here in the upper right, and it'll take you back to the standard display. There's also a Gradebook History, which can be useful if you can't remember why or when you changed a grade. This shows you every grading activity that you ever carried out in the gradebook. And should you have a grade TA who does some of the grading, it will tell you who graded that particular or who made that particular change or entered that particular grade. So it can be useful under certain circumstances, but the vast majority of time, you'll just leave it in the gradebook, the standard gradebook display like this. The next menu we'll talk about is the View menu. It allows you to, it gives you some extra control over how the gradebook is displayed to you. You can arrange it in default order, which is the order that either the initial order of the assignments in the assignments tool, or the changes or incorporating the changes you have made by dragging and dropping them. You can sort it by assignment name, either alphabetically or in reverse alphabetical order. You can sort it by due date, oldest to newest, newest to oldest, by points. In other words, how many points is each assessment worth? It'll set. You can sort it from the lowest value assignment to the highest value, or vice versa. Or you can sort it by module, so that the assignments that are linked in, or the assessments that are linked into a particular module, are grouped together, and it'll group it in order by module, as in the modules list in the course. Those are things you can set, or you can just drag them around and put them in drag the columns around, put them in the order you desire manually. These arrangements are particularly useful if you have a lot of assessments and you don't really want to have to do that manually. You can sort the gradebook columns from left to right in the order that you desire. We also have Gradebook Filters, which allow you to filter to display just assessments that meet certain criteria. For instance, the only one that's listed right now is the modules filter. A little later, we'll have another filter there called assignment group filter, and that will make more sense once I tell you what an assignment group is. I can't do everything first. So let's just take a look at how the modules filter works. If I decide to select the modules filter, I get a little menu up here in the upper right. And by default, it'll show the assessments that are linked into any of your modules, or all of them. But these are the modules that I have in my modules list. If I just want to see the module or the assessments associated with the why screencasting module, I can click there, and it simplifies the gradebook considerably. So if I'm grading in my first module, this is my second module actually, if I'm grading in a particular module at a given point in the book, I can simplify the gradebook considerably, and I don't have to scroll back and forth looking for the assessment I'm trying to grade. And this is temporary. I can go back and go to all modules and get everything back very quickly. So that doesn't permanently affect anything. It just filters out the assessments that you want to look at a given period, given point in time. So it can make the gradebook a little less tedious to deal with. Statuses Canvas will color code various assignment submissions or assignment cells according to various assignments or various statuses. If a student is late turning in an assignment, but they still have the capability to turn it in, the cell will be highlighted in red. If, on the other hand, a student has not turned in an assignment and the due date has passed and they can no longer turn it in, it'll show as missing, purple. If it's been resubmitted, if you give them more than one chance to submit the assignment, it will be this light green. If it's been dropped, and these two are really hard to tell the difference, it's basically the same color. If you have set up a rule in an assignment group that says drop the lowest grade in this assignment group, it will show you the grade that has been dropped. Or in some cases, you may excuse an assignment if a student was ill or something, and that assignment was one of a large number of like brief quizzes or something like that. You may just say, don't bother. We're just going to average your grade without that assessment. Then you can excuse it. And the dropped and the excused both have this kind of orange cast tone. These are automatic. You don't have to do anything to make them happen or make them show up. There are also a couple of column modifications you can make in the gradebook. A particularly useful one is a notes column. This is not visible by default, but if I select the notes column, I get just to the right of the student names, a notes column where I can type anything I wish. I just click on the cell, and let's say test student is in hospital with COVID. It's all too likely these recently. I can enter that and save it. So it's a reminder to me that that student, might be having some problems keeping up with their work. These notes are visible only to you. The students cannot see them under any circumstances. So it's just a little reminder to you. And you can, if you wish, make this notes column bigger by clicking and dragging, just like you can in Excel, clicking and dragging the column header back and forth. So you can make that bigger if it's convenient. That's a very useful one. You can also choose to show unpublished assignments. Okay, normally, as I mentioned earlier, when you create an assessment, you create a quiz or a homework assignment or a graded discussion in Canvas, it doesn't show up in the gradebook as a column until you publish it. But if you select unpublished assignments, then they will appear. I guess I don't have any unpublished assignments, but they'll appear in red. They'll be labeled as unpublished. So you know that the students can't see those. It's up to you whether you decide whether you want to see those in the gradebook or not. They can junk up your display if you have a bunch of unpublished assignments that you're not using this term or something. So that the default is to have those not display in the gradebook. All right, now we can talk about the actions menu. Next one, we're just taking them in order here. This allows you to export your gradebook to an Excel file where you can either just store the gradebook or offline so that should your internet connection go down or whatever, you get a phone call from a student, and what did I get on the last test? Or, well, I can't really ask you that over the phone, but if a student is complaining about their grade and you're not sure what grade you gave them, you can go in and look at the at your downloaded copy of your grade book and see, or you can just back those grades up. The value of that is somewhat questionable, because the very next time Canvas loses a grade, or the very next time Canvas loses a grade will be the first time. It's never happened in our experience with Canvas. It's very, 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 very unlikely that Canvas would ever lose track of a grade. And I've never heard of it happening either anywhere else. And you, as faculty members, retain access to your courses and to your grade books in those courses indefinitely. There's course shells are never removed from Canvas. Disk space in data centers has gotten so cheap that Canvas just hasn't really bothered to create a tool that would allow us to remove some of your old courses from Canvas. They stay there indefinitely. Every course that's ever been offered, every Canvas shell that's ever contained a course on our Canvas system since we started using Canvas in 2016 is still there. And the instructor, if they're still an employee at the district, still have access to it. So you can always go back and look at the grade book in your course. But sometimes it's convenient to have an offline copy of it. And one thing that you can do, though I'm not going to demonstrate that here because we don't have time, and to do a side explanation of how to use Excel, but you can download this course, this grade book, drop it into Excel, do manipulations of the grades in Excel that you can't do in the Canvas grade book. Let's say you have a very complex grading scheme and the Canvas grade book can't really handle it. You can do that in Excel and then upload the results back into Canvas. That's a little bit more complex, but it is a possibility. But downloading a copy of the grade book is dirt simple. You just click the action menu and you say either export current gradebook view, which will show you just what's on the screen, or export the entire gradebook is more common. It starts the export. It usually doesn't take very long. And it will then download the export as a so-called comma-separated value file, a CSV file down here, which is a type of Excel file. You can open that in Excel or any other spreadsheet program, and you can open it in Google Slides or Open Office's spreadsheet or whatever. And then you'll have an offline, you can save that to your hard drive and have an offline copy of it. In my case, I have told Chrome to ask me where to store or where to save any files that are downloaded from the internet. So Chrome is asking me, where do you want to put that? That's not a default behavior in most web browsers. You have to tell the web browser to do that. If you don't tell it to do that, it's just going to put it in the root of your downloads area, either on the PC or on the Mac. But I have told Chrome to ask me where to put it. And I have a, somewhere here, I have a Zoom or a Canvas gradebook export folder that I keep all those in. So I just open that folder and save. This file name here tells me when I made this export, because that's important. Obviously, if after this export is made, if you then change grades in the Canvas gradebook, well, those changes will not be reflected in this download. This is not a dynamic. This is not dynamically linked back to the gradebook in Canvas. This is a snapshot in time, and so this tells me what course it was exported from, and when. Both things I might need to know. And I can just save that to the to my hard drive, and then open that file by double clicking on the little biscuit there in Chrome. And this is what the gradebook export looks like. It's just an Excel spreadsheet with all the grades in it. So that's real simple to do. All right, we've talked about this filter menu here already. And there is also a settings button for the gradebook as a whole. This affects the entire gradebook, all the columns, all the students and so on in the gradebook. And it gives you certain global capabilities in the gradebook. If I click on that geared wheel there, get something out of the way here. There we go. You get a couple of options. You have a late policies tab and a posting policies tab. The late policies tab is kind of interesting. If you have an organized policy about what to do with late submissions, assuming that you allow them to happen at all, you can apply grades for missing submissions. For instance, if you don't accept late submissions at all, you can just set this to a 0% and the student gets no credit for it. Or more flexibly, you can apply deductions automatically. Let's say you say, well, you know, if you turn it in just a little late, I'm going to let you turn it in, but I'm going to take some points off because you didn't turn it in on time. You have some flexibility in that. You get to choose the percentage deduction, maybe 10%, just spitballing, and the deduction interval, either a day or an hour. Just how, you know, all right, if a student misses it by an hour, I don't want them to lose credit entirely, but I want it to hurt a little bit so they don't make a policy of that. So you can set that to an hour, you know, and after a few hours, there'd be no point in them turning it in because it will have chopped all of their grade value away. Though you can set a hard deck, a floor on that. Let's say you don't want the grade to go below 50%, or the deduction to take it below 50%. Now that, in other words, it's not going to take away more than half of the value of whatever the student earned because it was late.
Dave?
Yes.
When you do this, is that applied to all the
Yes.
assignments, like exams and homework and all that?
Everything. These are global settings.
Global.
Right. And they can only be set globally. So it applies to everything.
And the one above, like a grade for missing submission.
That's
before
global.
there was like a blank that we had to do it manually 0, but if we put 0.
Indeed, the principal use for this one at the top is to avoid you having to go through and enter zeros when students don't turn things in.
Right.
A missing submission is one that's past the due date and in which the student has no way to now submit now. In that case, there's never going to be they're going to get a 0 for that grade. This allows you to automate that process so that you don't have to go through and enter the zeros manually.
And then if the student takes it later, submit it later, I could override.
You could override the grade. That's correct.
Thank
That
you.
can save you some time. There's also the posting policy. I don't like to spend a lot of time on this. Basically, when you grade something in the grade book, normally the students see, as soon as you enter the grade in the grade book, the student could potentially see that. It's posted to their grades tool. You can fix it so that that doesn't happen until you come back and say, okay, I'm ready to post. So like you're in a situation where you want to get all the grades done before you let anybody see their grade. You can set this global policy to manually post grades. And you can go back and forth on this as often as you like. But that's usually more trouble than it's worth, in my view, anyway. But you do have that option. So those are the gradebook global settings that you can activate. And that takes us through the first slide. Let's go to the next slide. Now, those global settings affect all of the whole gradebook, all of the columns, all of the students. There are also menus associated with each gradebook column that allow you to control things like the order in which the students appear in the gradebook and other things. So let's take a look at those individual column menus now and see what you can do there. Almost every one of the columns has a column menu available. If you mouse over the column header, you'll see a menu button appear, the 3 vertical dots. And if you click that, you get a menu that will allow you, that shows you what you can do to the gradebook or to this particular column. And how you can manipulate this particular column. Now, the sort option affects the entire, it affects all the rows. If you sort a particular gradebook column, all the grades that go with that name are sorted with it. You don't disconnect the student from the right grades and so on. You don't have to worry about that. But you can sort this student, you can sort the grade book on student name, by SIS. You don't have access to SIS ID or integration ID, but you can sort it by the login ID. If you have a list of your students in order by their student IDs, you can sort the grade book that way. And you can pick, if you're sorting by name, you can pick alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order. You can control how the names are displayed, either first, or last, first. Secondary info, again, is not really useful to you. You can show that, for instance, their 10-digit user ID if you wish. And that will show up below the student's actual name. These students are obviously have fanciful names because they're not real people. But you can control whether that shows up or not. So it might be useful, for instance, for you to see the student's ID number below their name, because all too often PeopleSoft refers to them by that ID number. So that might be useful. By default, when students drop the course, they become inactive in the course. And they vanish from the gradebook. If you want to see students who have been dropped, to see what they had in the gradebook before they dropped, you can activate inactive enrollments. I don't have any like that in this course, but you can see the students who have been dropped by selecting inactive enrollments. And we don't conclude enrollments till after the end of the term, so you don't have to worry about that. So those are the things you can manipulate in the column menu for the student name column, which is always the first column in the gradebook. You can't change that. Notes column doesn't have a menu, but all of the grade columns do have context menus. I can click that and I can sort the gradebook on this column by the grade, low to high or high to low, or I can sort the missing, sort by missing grades or by late grades. So I can find those and have them grouped together so I can make decisions or communicate with those students or whatever. I can just pull up the speed grader from this menu and automatically load the first student's submission into the speed grader, or at least bring up the first student in the speed grader, whether they've submitted the assessment or not. And then I can just work my way down the column in the speed grader without having to go back and forth between the speed grader and the gradebook, which wastes time. So you can access the speed grader from here. That's not normally how I do it, but it certainly is an option. Maybe the most powerful option here is that you can message students through your inbox tool, through Canvas messaging, who meet certain criteria associated with this column, this particular grade column. If you click that, you get this compose message box, and you can more or less automatically message students who have either not yet submitted that assignment or whose submission has not been graded, like, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. Don't give up, it's coming. Or you can send a message to students who scored more than a certain cutoff value as a congratulatory message. Or more commonly, you can message students who scored below a certain cutoff value that you set. If I select one of these options, you get the option to set the cutoff value. And it's, you can send a message of, well, you didn't do real well on this assessment. Here's some resources you might want to look at. Here's a way you can avoid that from happening again and avoid having that happen again, and so on, and send some useful encouragement to them to do better. It tells you how many students are selected. And it automatically puts a subject line in that tells them what it's about, though you can modify that. Then you can type a message of encouragement, caution, downright disapproval, depending on your point of view or your need. You can add an attachment to it if you need to. You can even record an audio or video comment to be sent to these students. It's sent to them, goes into their Canvas inbox. It's a personal message, so they don't, you not want to name names and things like that in a situation like that if you were doing a video or audio comment. But you can make it more personal than just a typed out comment. And then you can send it, and that message will go into their Canvas inboxes. If, as is probable, they haven't altered the default notification settings in Canvas, their default notification settings, it will probably be forwarded on to their personal email box as well. And they'll get the message there, though they won't get audio or video comments that way. Those don't forward. But any message and any attached files will forward to their personal email, unless they have told Canvas not to do that. And very few of them get around to doing that. So, and the default is in Canvas with new accounts is to have any message that appears in the Canvas inbox for a student also forwarded to their personal email. The same for you. So you may want to check that. If you're getting a lot of emails from Canvas you don't want, that's something to check. Anyway, this gives you a very easy, efficient way to provide encouragement, warning, exhortation to students based on their grade on a particular assessment. Curve grades, I don't even want to touch. I don't really think you want to go there with Canvas. You'd be better off doing that some other way. You can set a default grade. This is sort of like that option we had in the global settings that would allow us to add a 0 in to a cell automatically if student didn't turn something in. You want to be a little careful with default, but this affects just this column, just this assessment. You want to be careful with default grades. You don't want to use them until after until there's no possibility that the student could submit the grade, because the default grade will override anything else. So if you accidentally do this before you finish grading, for instance, you could have a problem. But after you finish grading all of the submissions and the students can no longer submit the assignment, you can set a default grade, which you can set as numerically. And then you won't have to go back and enter zeros for manually for assessments that were not turned in. And there are reasons why you might want to do that, or why you want to have a 0 in there if the student has not turned in the assignment. Yes.
Yeah, can you click the set default again?
Yeah. Set default grade.
Yeah, I learned from the Canvas tech support. It's very important to not click the little square. Yeah, to the left. Yeah.
To not overwrite already entered grades.
So if you are by accident put a check mark there, you are in big trouble.
Right. No, you
so
don't.
So if you
want to
put
do
the
that.
check mark,
it could be. Yeah, it could be. You could get unpleasant results. You're right. I certainly don't recommend that.
So they want you to be very careful not to put a check
Not to
mark
put that in there
box,
unless you have a very strong reason for doing so,
right.
Which I can't imagine what it would be. Okay, let's see. We can also hide the grades temporarily from students. You will still see them. You can't hide the student grades from yourself, which as a support person, I really very much appreciate, because in Blackboard, it used to be possible for faculty to hide the grades from themselves. And sometimes that would happen inadvertently, and there was a lot of worry. You can't do that in Canvas. Okay, and then you can change the grade posting policy for this column alone to have it be manual rather than automatic. Let's see. Oh, and you can also determine whether grades are going to be entered as points, which is the default, or as percentages. All right. That's everything in column menus. Now let's look at the total column. That's where the information that you're most interested in appears. By default, the total column always appears as the rightmost column in a gradebook. You can change that if you wish. There's a context menu for the total, or a column menu for the total column. It's much simpler. Let's see. Yeah. One of the things you can do is move that total column to the front of the gradebook. If I do that, it appears just to the right of the student name, and that can be useful when you're entering grades into PeopleSoft, but normally it's at the right-hand end. You can sort the grade book by total column, very useful when you're assigning final grades, either low to high or high to low. So that allows you to look for natural or for breaks in the grade distribution. I always did that when I was trying to decide where to draw the line between letter grades. I would sort the grade book like this and look for natural breaks in it. And if maybe, grades, maybe I had a nominal grade of 90 to 100 for an A, but the grades went down a fairly tight group of students down to 89, and then was a big jump, maybe down to 85 or something like that. I would maybe give the student with an 89 an A as well, and so on. This allows you to play, sorting it allows you to play with things like that. Also, you can display the total column as a percentage if you wish, instead of a point value, or you can change that back. Notice there is a column here right next to the total column, which shows a percentage grade. And as things stand right now, that is the same as the percentage grade of the total column. That is, taking the that's computed by taking the number of points the student earned and dividing it by the possible points for all the assessments, added up, the sum of all those, and then multiplying by 100. So this total and the assignments percentages here are the same at this point. So basically, at this point, you do have both a point total and a percentage grade at the end. If you just leave this way, what this assignments column here is the so-called assignment group column. And right now we only have one assignment group, and it's named assignments. All the assignments, all the assessments are in the same assignment group. So if you don't create new assignment groups, which we'll talk about in a moment, you'll have this one column labeled assignments, plural, and it will be the percentage grade, and then you'll have the total column with the point grade. So you have the best of both worlds. You don't have to switch the total column to percentages. But you can't get rid of this column, this assignments column. You can't delete it. And this will make a little more sense when we talk a little bit more about assignment groups here in a second. Okie dokie. So how is this total column computed? Well, by default, the total column is just the number of points the student earned, the sum of all of the grades in the grade book, the point values of all the grades in the grade book. It's simply adding them up. If you do a percentage grade, the percentage grade is just the total points earned by the student divided by the sum of the possible points for all the assessments, which you set when you create the assessments, and then multiply by 100. So that's a very straightforward situation. In that situation, in that scenario, the all-important weighting of individual assessments, let's face it, some assessments are worth more than others. Some have more of an impact on the grade than others, like a final exam will have more of an impact than a pop quiz on the student's final grade. Weighting in the default scenario in the Canvas gradebook is just done by the number of points assigned or weighted, or the number of points possible for each assignment. Like these quizzes here are 5 points each, and it tells you that in the in the column header of the grade book, while this assignment here, this homework assignment, is worth 10 points. It's worth twice as much to the final grade, or has twice as much impact on the final grade as any of the quizzes. And these other assignments here, which are 20 points, have 4 times the impact of one of those quizzes on the final grade. So the simplest way conceptually to weight the impact of different assessments on the final grade computation is simply to assign an appropriate number of points to that assessment. If an assessment is worth twice what another assessment is, give it twice the number of points, possible points, and your weighting is done for you. That sounds very simple, but because of the way Canvas quizzes work, it's not as simple as it might be, because you can't, in classic quizzes, the quizzing engine that we are using right now, the basic quizzes in Canvas that we've been using for years, you can't assign a point value to a quiz as a whole. What you do when you create the quiz, you add questions to it, you assign point values to each of the questions. And the point value of the quiz as a whole is just the sum of the point values of all the questions in the quiz. So if, in order to meet or to fit in with your weighting scheme, you need a quiz to have a certain number of points, you got to be real careful when you're deciding how many questions to put in the quiz and how many points each question is worth in order to have that come out that way. These quizzes are all worth the same number of points because I either gave them the same number of questions with the same number of points for each question, or I was very careful when I was assigning points to questions within the quizzes that the total came out to 5. And that's tedious, especially if you have a lot of quizzes and they have varying numbers and types of questions in them and so on. You can spend a lot of time doing that, and you can get yourself in situations where you have to assign fractional point values to a question in a quiz. You say, well, I want to add one more question to the quiz, but I've only got a half a point left to stay within the desired total points for that quiz. So I might have to give that question, make that question worth just half a point or a third of a point or 3/4 of a point or whatever. You can do that. The Canvas will let you assign fractional point values, but this gets to be a pain in the neck, or can get to be. And so if you do a lot of quizzes and you have to have them come out to a particular number of possible points, it gets tedious. So what's the alternative? How can you avoid that? Well, there's another way you can weight your assessments in the Canvas gradebook. Rather than weighting each assessment individually, you can divide the assessments up into groups, or into so-called assignment groups. There's Canvas using the word assignment when they really mean assessment again, but that you can divide these assessments up into groups, and you can weight the groups instead of weighting the individual assessments. That generally takes a lot less thought. And very often when we're setting up or typing out our syllabi, and we're telling the students, how the different assessments that they're going to have to complete are going to contribute to their final grade, we often say, well, maybe your quizzes are going to count 10% of the grade, and maybe your assignments, which are generally more authentic and harder to cheat on and things like that, might constitute, I don't know, 70% or 80% of the grade. And maybe I've got a graded discussion in here. That might be another 10% of the grade for class participation. That's typically how we tell our students how the different assessments that they're going to complete in the course contribute to their final grade. That is very easy to do if you divide your assessments into groups and weight the groups. And that's something that you only have to do once at the beginning of the term, and then it follows through. And it's pretty simple to do. You go to the Assignments tool to do this, the Assignments link in the course menu, and you add an assignment group. You add assignment groups. By default, the shell comes with one assignment group. It's labeled, it's named Assignments, plural, and all of your assessments go into it. Your quizzes, your homework assignments, your graded discussions, all go into this one assignment group. And you have that's where that column in the gradebook came from that was headed assignments. But you can add more assignment groups. For instance, this is a fairly simple course. I tried to keep this simple so it doesn't take forever to present. But I've got 3 kinds of assessments here. I've got quizzes, and these quizzes are all alike. I mean, they're all fairly low stakes, 5-point quizzes. I've got several assignments, which constitute the bulk of the work in the course and the bulk of the credit, each one worth 20 points, and except for one that's worth 10. And then a graded discussion that is worth just 5 points, just like a quiz. So I can subdivide these into 3 assignment groups. I can make a quizzes group, and I can call these groups anything I like. And that shows up down here. There's no assignments in there right now. I'm just creating the groups. And a homework assignments group. Save that. Now I've got 2 more. And a graded discussions. That only takes a moment, probably less if you can actually type. Now, I can assort these assessments appropriately among the labeled or the new assignment groups very easily. I'm going to put quizzes at the top here just to make it easier, he said. I dropped it. There we go. Now I have 3 quizzes. See the little double row of dots here? That's a movement tool. I can just click and drag the quizzes up into the quizzes group. Takes no time at all. Obviously, the more assessments and the more types of assessments you have, the longer this is going to take. But it's a one-time thing. You'll probably never have to do it again because this structure will just copy from semester to semester once you're happy with it. Now I've got homework assignments. And
Much more comfortable.
So here's a homework assignment. That symbol tells me that's a homework assignment. And I can just drag those up into the homework assignments group. Doesn't take very long at all. And then finally, I've got a graded discussion here. This is a graded discussion. I can drag that into the graded discussions group. Now there's nothing left in the assignments group, the one that the shell came with, and I can just delete that and get rid of it so it doesn't show up as an empty column in the gradebook and confuse me and the students. But now I have 3 assignment groups where I had 2 before, and each one contains a series of assignments that are related in some way. And you can have more than this. You could have like a group for quizzes and another group for chapter or major exams. Yes. Question?
$2.99.
I'm sorry?
You had to get two.
That's okay. Bye.
Oh,
Smarts and finals.
right. So you can have any number of assignment groups. They can have as many assessments in them as you wish, or as few. You might have, if you have a final exam, it would probably have its own assignment group, and there'd just be one final exam in there. The advantage to this is not just making it easier to tell what's what when you go to the assignments tool, but the advantage to this is that once you have created your assignment groups, you can go to this double secret menu up here in the upper right-hand corner of the assignments page, which you get to by clicking on the assignments link in the course menu. You can go to this, and there's an option to assign weights, computational weights to each group. You have an option to weight final grades based on assignment groups instead of based upon individual assignment weights, individual assignment points possible. You select that and you see each of your assignment groups and you have a weighting number that you can just type in. If you're told your students the quizzes are worth 10%, you can just type that in and Canvas will make that true. Homework assignments represent the bulk of this course, so I might make that 80. And of course, the whole thing has to add up to 100, so it keeps track of how many percentage or how much percentage I have accounted for so far. So that leaves 10% for the graded discussions. Total is 100%. That means it's all kosher. And I save this. And now I don't have to worry about the number of points in each of the quizzes. What Canvas will do for if say one quiz had 5 points, another had 10 possible points and so on, it just adds up when the student takes the quizzes, it adds up the total grade that the student was awarded for all 3 quizzes and divides by the total number of points in all the quizzes and creates a percentage grade, which is then added into a formula that Canvas creates for itself that you never see, a weighted average, so a formula of weighted average, and it weights the individual quizzes appropriately. And it weights each quiz equally within that 10%. Each quiz contributes an equal weight to 33 1/3% to the total grade, even if there are different number of points in each quiz. So you don't have to spend so much time making your quiz points, total quiz points, come out to a certain value. That's the primary advantage of doing things this way. Also, it allows you to validate that paragraph you put in your syllabus where you say, well, these assessments are worth 10%, these are worth 80, these are worth 10. This makes that come out exact. And it just takes a lot less time to set up. Then you don't have to worry. You can have assignments down here that had different numbers of points in them. But again, Canvas will average all that out and weight the assignments as a group and give you a grade. Very simple to set up. And probably takes less work in the long run, especially if you have a lot of quizzes. You can do it either way. You can do it the default way, or you can do it this way. It's up to you. There is something you can do here that's pretty cool as well. If you create assignment groups, you also have the option to drop the lowest grade in a group. If I edit the assignment group, I can not only change the weight if I decide to, but I can also drop the lowest one score. If I have a bunch of quizzes, I could drop the lowest 2 or the lowest 3. And there are all sorts of advantages to that. For one thing, it prevents you from having to do makeup quizzes. You just say, if you miss a quiz, that's the one you dropped, and so on. If you're going to adhere to grading theory, assessment theory, carefully, it says if you drop the lowest score, you probably ought to drop the highest score too, so that you drop the outliers. You get a more reliable assessment of your students' performance. I've never had the nerve to do that. If you try that, I'd love to see, assuming you survive the students appearing outside your office with torches and pitchforks and ropes and things like that. I never had the nerve to do that, but you can drop the lowest grade in the group very easily. You can also tell if there's a particular assessment that you really don't want dropped, you can tell it not to drop that one. So now I've got a rule here that says drop the lowest grade. And I didn't have to, and I don't have to do any recomputation or anything like that. Canvas handles all the arithmetic and the basic algebra for you. All right, that does have some impact on the grade, particularly on the total column. Mainly, it militates that, or mandates that the total column be displayed as a percentage. You can't change it back to points. And also these, you get all of these assignment group columns that tell you how the students did. You know, if they're doing better on the quizzes than they are the graded discussions or whatever, you can see that very clearly here. So it gives you a little bit more information than you would get if you didn't have the assignment groups about how the students are doing and what they're doing well on and what they're not doing well on, at least by type of assignment. All right. That's all of that slide taken care of. A couple of miscellaneous topics before we move on and look at the speed grader. That won't take as long as the gradebook, thank goodness. You can have Canvas assign letter grades automatically. You do this by enabling letter grade computation and then setting up a grading scheme that is telling Canvas where to cut off between an A and a B and a B and a C and so on. Very simple and quick to do. You're not obligated to adhere to those calculated grades. It just gives you a point of departure. Canvas does not communicate automatically with PeopleSoft. It doesn't send grades to PeopleSoft automatically. It has that capability, but the folks in student services are never going to let that happen. And I don't blame them. There's too many things that could happen when you have systems like that. It would save you the hassle at the end of the term of manually entering your letter grades into PeopleSoft. But the opportunity for mishap is way too great. So that's never going to happen here. But at least it would give you a point of departure. You know, you can always mentally override a grade saying, well, I know Canvas says that should be a B, but this guy's just a hair below the cutoff. I'm giving him an A anyway. You can do that. But let's see how you set that up in Canvas. It's real quick and simple. It's no big deal. You go to the settings button, the settings link in your course menu, and you scroll down in your course details tab here to where it says grading scheme, about halfway down. By default, that's unchecked. Enable course grading scheme is unchecked. So if you click that, you have the option to set your grading scheme. That is, tell Canvas, well, 90 to 100 is an A, and 80 to 99, 80 to 90, below 90 is a B, and so on. When you click Set Grading Scheme, though, you get the default grading scheme for Canvas, which is not suitable. You get pluses and minuses. We don't do pluses and minuses, so you can't use this scheme. But there is an option here in the upper right of this box to select another scheme. And we have created a scheme that meets, is the most common, by no means mandated, but the most common choice, which we call a standard scheme. Again, that doesn't mean you're enjoined to use it. You get to decide where to cut your letter grades off. But the most common choice is this: 90 to 100% is an A, 80 to 90% a B, and so on by tens down to 60%, cut off for a D, and anything below that is an F. If you want to use that scheme, you just say you just click where it says use this grading standard, and that's how Canvas will assign letter grades automatically. It'll look at your total column. If your total column is displayed as points, it will do the percentage calculation for you and then select the appropriate letter grade. And it's absolutely heartless. If a student has an 89.9, they're going to get, in this case, they'll get a B. So that's where you come in. You got to decide whether it's fair or not. If this is not the grading scheme, if you don't want this grading scheme either, you can manage grading schemes, and you can create a grading scheme which starts with the default grading scheme in Canvas, which has the pluses and minuses. You can remove the pluses and minuses by clicking on the X's out here. You can change. Let's say you want your A to be 92 to 100. You have you have real high standards for an A. You can set your cutoff points anywhere, and they automatically adjust as you go down. So you can roll your own grading scheme and then save it. It'll ask you to give it a name. You have to give it a name up here, my scheme or Helen's scheme or whatever, and then it'll save that, and it will remember that scheme, and you can select it in future courses and so on. But I'm just going to leave it at the so-called standard scheme here. If I go back to settings, and it should show that I have that selected. Well, it just shows me that I've enabled the course grading scheme, and I have selected that standard scheme. So if I go back to my gradebook now, in the total column, I see letter grades as well as percentage grades. And if I'd left that at points, I'd still see letter grades out to the side. Finally, occasionally, you may want to create gradebook columns in the gradebook manually. If an assignment is handled completely outside of Canvas on paper, or if it's or whatever reason that there's not a homework assignment or a quiz or a graded discussion in Canvas that corresponds to that gradable item, you can create a column for that item manually. This is especially useful if you're using Canvas as a supplement in a face-to-face course, and you've got all these assignments and assessments that your students are submitting to you on paper or in some other way, and you're generating grades, but not through Canvas. You can create a column for those grades in Canvas and record them in Canvas, so you can keep track of them that way. You can use the Canvas gradebook to compute your final grades if you like. And you can share those grades with the students reliably or safely and legally, because students can't see each other's grades. They can only see their own. And that's protected by a password and a student login name, which is their student ID. So in order for somebody to see a student's grades, they'd have to know both their Canvas, both their PeopleSoft ID and their Canvas password, which is deemed to be sufficient protection. If students are so careless as to let someone else get all that information, then they're out of luck. But other people will be able to see their grades, but that's very unlikely. So that's considered due diligence in this case. So what you do in order to make a gradebook column in Canvas is to create a so-called placeholder assignment. You go to your assignments tool, you add an assignment. This is an assignment that won't appear in a module probably or anything like that. You just will be hanging out, floating around out there. I'm just going to call this a manual grade column, so I remember what it is. But you could call it, if it like an essay or something like that, you could just name it whatever is appropriate. You probably don't need any instructions, because this is just a placeholder that's just being created in order to add a column to the gradebook. You can set a number of points for it, as usual. You can decide if it's a homework assignment, if you have assignment groups set up, you can choose what assignment group to automatically load it into. And your submission type will either be no submission or on paper. They're functionally equivalent. And that's all you need to do. And you save that and you publish it so it will actually show up in the gradebook. Now, if I go back and look at the gradebook and scroll out, usually those are added all the way out to the right. There it is. Nope. There it is, just to the right of the total. You can't be exactly sure where it's going to show up. And there's a manual grade column. You can put that wherever you like, and you can enter grades into it manually, just as you would into a paper grade book, only you type them in. So that's how you create a column for an assessment that is not fulfilled or present in Canvas in any other way. Righty? Now, the remaining half hour, what I have budgeted for the speed grader. This is the grading tool in Canvas. This is how you grade assignments that are submitted to Canvas. If you are grading something that's submitted on paper, obviously you grade it in the usual way. You blue pencil it or whatever, and write a grade on the paper, and then maybe enter that into the Canvas gradebook. But these are the speed graders for things that are fulfilled within Canvas. Quizzes that are taken in Canvas. Homework assignments that are submitted to Canvas. Graded discussions that take place in Canvas in a discussion topic in Canvas. So let's see what the speed grader looks like and how it works for each of these different types of assessments. And I have some submitted assessments here that haven't been graded for this purpose. Let's start with an assignment here. Here I have an assignment, a homework assignment. How do I grade that? Well, I can see that I have a couple of submissions for that assignment that have not been graded. That's what these little submission symbols mean. It's like a document page with a little circle on the side and an exclamation point in it if you look closely. And it's impossible to miss. Now, I could just enter this grade by clicking on that symbol and typing in a grade. I could do that if I were Karnak. Nobody remembers Johnny Carson. I actually, looking at you all, some of you do remember Johnny Carson. You know, the skit he would do, where he, put the the envelope on his head and read the envelope supposedly without opening it and so on. But none of us being the great Karnak, what we're going to do is bring up this assignment in the speed grader. The easiest way, not the only way, but the easiest way to do that is to click on the assignment symbol. And then you get this little box with a right pointing arrow in it. You click on that, and this panel slides in from the right. You get some, if there's any status associated with this assessment or this submission, I should say, you see it here and so on. Here's another place where you can enter the grade if you're Karnak. But most likely what you're going to do is click here on this link to the speed grader. And that will bring this particular assignment submission up in the speed grader. Usually, if you design the assignment well, the student's submission will actually appear in this window on the left here. So you can read it or look at it. It might be an image, might be a video, but you can interact with it here. You can evaluate it by looking at it here. You can read it. And if if it's obvious what the grade should be and so on, you can just type the grade over here in this grade box, in this right-hand panel in the speed grader, and submit the grade, and then move on to the next student by just clicking an arrow here, or back to the previous student within this particular assessment, within this gradebook column. The speed grader gives you some information. It tells me this is 52 words. If you've specified an answer of at least 100 words, well, you can tell very quickly if they've done that or not. It's possible that the submission will not appear in this window. In order to have the assessment appear in this window, of course, the submission has to be either through a so-called text box or a rich content editor box where the student types it in the assignment, or the student has to upload a file to the Dropbox for the assignment that can be displayed here in the gradebook or in the speed grader window. And not everything can be. Generally, any Microsoft Office document will display here, that being a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation, they'll appear here just fine. It will also display the submission if the file is submitted is an open office document. Open Office being a free office suite that students can download and use. Canvas supports that. And it's sort of like Microsoft Office. But that's not going to be much of an issue for us anymore, because as of right now, all of our students have access to the full Microsoft Office 365 suite. So some of them don't know it yet, but they all have access to it. And some of them don't know how to use it yet, but IT is working on that, working on training and help for the students in that regard. But now you can realistically require, for instance, that a student, if it's a writing assignment, the student can be required to submit it as a Word document, and they'll have access to Microsoft Word, a full version of Microsoft Word, to create the Word document and then upload it to the Dropbox in the assignment or for the assignment. And Word document, this is a Word document. They appear here just fine. If the student submits a file that the speed grader can't display here. You'll just see a link to the file that they uploaded. You'll have to click on that link. Actually, you'll see it over here. And you'll have to click on this link and download the file to your local computer and open it there. And if a student, let's say you're working on a Windows PC, and the student sends you a Pages file, which is a Macintosh or Apple Macintosh word processor file. You don't have Pages. There's no version of Pages that run on a Windows PC. So you can't grade it. You can't view it at all. So it's generally a good idea to set up your assignment with clear directions and telling them, if you don't submit it as this type of file, I ain't going to grade it because I can't. And you will. I may or may not give you a chance to redo it in order to give me something I can grade. So,
Dave.
Yes, go ahead.
When you create an assignment, you can specify what file type you accept.
You can limit file types when you create a homework assignment. That is correct. That was Friday's seminar.
Okay.
Yeah, but yes, you can do that. But as we move forward, the expectation is going to be more and more generally that students are going to submit files if they're documents or spreadsheets or presentations. They're going to submit them in Microsoft Office 365 format because they're going to have access to that for free. So you can reasonably expect them to do that. So those types of files will display very nicely here. So you don't have to download the file and open it up on your own computer because Lord knows the file could have a virus embedded in it. And this insulates you from that prospect. So
Dave?
Go ahead.
So what I want is I want students to take a picture of their work and upload it.
Yes.
So like a JPEG, JPEG.
Mm-hmm. And Canvas will handle all common image formats.
PNG. PNG is also picture?
Yeah, PNG. That'll handle JPEG, PNG, and a couple of others. But JPEGs and PNGs are by far the most common. That's what you're going to get if you take a picture. You're going to get a JPEG if you take a picture with your phone and upload that. And that will display right here.
Okay.
You will see the image and you can work with it. If it's one of a reasonable number of file types, like a Microsoft Office file, you can also annotate the or mark up the submission, like with a blue pencil on a writing assignment that came in on paper. You have your pencils here. You have several types of annotation tools here that you can use. You can do a point annotation, which is this pin symbol here. And you can just click that anywhere within the submission. And you get an option to leave a comment that's specific to that particular spot in the submission. Like, do you mean narration? Or maybe just or narration, if you wanted to give them.
So I could do the annotation on JPEG and PNG, right?
Yes, I believe that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm going to find out for you. I don't remember.
Thank you, Dave.
You bet. You also have a highlighter tool, which will highlight it and allow you to leave a comment based on that highlight.
I'm really sorry, Dave, but can you briefly tell me the difference between JPEG and the PNG?
They're just different file formats. They have slightly different properties,
Mhm.
different capabilities. Both JPEGs and PNGs, though, are what are called standard inline graphics formats for the web. So you can embed those in web pages like in Canvas, and they will be rendered properly in a web browser on the other end. So those are the two best ones to stick with.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, that's the technical distinctions I'm not very familiar with either. They both give very reasonable quality for a very for as small as possible file. There are other graphics file formats which are much less efficient or lower in quality or whatever, but those two are the ones that are used by far the most commonly these days. There's a few new ones that are coming along that and Canvas will probably add support for them and so on. But if your students send you either a JPEG or a PNG, which is almost certainly what's going to be created by any tool they have access to, you'll be able to see it. And I've got to check and see whether you can annotate those using these tools or not. I don't remember. That's a very good question.
Thank you, Dave.
You bet. You have a text annotation, which is just a text box that you can put anywhere. You can move it around eventually. And let's see. And you can change the color and so on. You can also change the size of the text. And you can move it around, put it wherever you like. The you've got strike through, you've got freehand, and you can leave a comment for that. And all this is stored and the students will be able to see it once you finish the grading. Or you can draw in an area and comment on that.
So you
So,
can do this when the submission type is a Microsoft Word.
right. As long there's about 7 different file formats. Oh, and PDFs. You can, if they submit a PDF, you can do this, or a Word document, a Excel spreadsheet, a PowerPoint presentation, or an Open Office Writer document, or an Open Office spreadsheet document. I know are all ones that will work, or a PDF. And you can view and annotate, mark up the. So this is one great way to provide feedback. And that's the real strength in the speed grader, is its ability, the capability it gives you to provide feedback to your students. Because let's face it, that's where the learning occurs. There's some learning in the student, trying to do their best, but you're closing the loop on assessment here by providing feedback, showing the students what they did well, what they didn't do so well, and giving them hints on how to do better next time. That type of feedback is the soul of learning. It makes the assessment much more than just an assessment, an evaluation. It makes it a learning experience as well. And those markup feedback are very useful. But that's not the only way you can provide feedback. You also have a general comments box that you can type in. And you can submit that comment, and then you can add more comments later. If you're using Google Chrome, you don't even have to type the comment. Hit a record button. Nice job, period. The definition is perfect. And you've provided 3 applications and 2 tools as requested. Period. I stop recording. It's usually close to perfect. I have a one-time chance to edit this if something didn't get recognized properly. Read through it, and if it's good, and once I submit it, I can no longer edit it. But that can really save you time.
Dave,
Yes.
there's a way you can delete it by clicking the cross.
You
And
can
there-
delete it, but you can't
retype.
edit it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you can delete it and record it again.
Right.
You can't edit it. You can delete a comment just by clicking the X in the upper right-hand corner. As you add comments for a particular assessment, Canvas keeps track of them. You see this little icon here with a 4 next to it. If you click on that, you see previous comments you've made. And if you want to reuse those comments, you can put them in, not have to retype them or redictate them. And you can, if you have some extensive comments, you can type those up yourself in a Word document or some other type of file and attach that document to the grading record so the student can download it and look at it later. So if you have a very extensive set of feedback on a major writing assignment, you can type that up or dictate it in another application and then send that back to the student. This could include a copy of the file that they sent you that you've marked up in another application, like in Word. But my favorite is the video feedback. If you click this button, the one that looks like a little monitor with a playback button in it, and yeah, you can see that over top of my head there. Normally I've got a lot of cameras here, so I'm going to have to select the right one. Okay, you will appear. As you speak, if your microphone is selected properly and working properly, you'll see this little blue bar bounce back and forth at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see that, you may have to click on this microphone button here and select the appropriate microphone. Hopefully you don't have that many sound sources on your computer, but select different ones until you see that blue bar start to move. But we're looking good here. The next thing you do, of course, is just click the Start Recording button. Look at the camera. Remember, that's where your students are. It counts you down. Hey, that's a great submission. Good definition, compact but correct. And you supplied everything else required. Everything looks good. Thanks for the good work. Keep it up. Then you click Finish. You can play this back. Hey, that's a great submission, to make sure that it recorded, and then just save it. That feedback then becomes a part of the grading record. It uploads it to the speed grader. It sits there. You can go back and look at it later, and the student clicks on their grade tool, they'll be able to play that video back and get your feedback. I find this to be faster than typing out or dictating feedback more often than not. And it's a lot more personal and a lot more engaging, more human. So those are numerous ways that, and they've added some emojis as well. If you just want to add a quick thumbs up, you can submit that too. So you got lots of ways to provide feedback in the speed grader. And the more feedback you give, the better your students will like it. And those of you who've taken the certification course have gotten feedback, and probably if you would, you may not admit it, but sometimes you might have kind of looked forward to that feedback and really appreciated it. Your students, I guarantee, will, because that means a lot to them. This is their grade. So you can never over communicate with your students in a distance education course, and they will appreciate it. And the speed grader allows you to do this efficiently and not take up your entire life. One more thing I'll show you in this particular assignment is you can also create a rubric for the assignment. Don't have time in this session to show you how to create rubrics. We do other sessions like the assessments in Canvas session, or we do a separate session just on Canvas rubrics. But a rubric, of course, is a grading table. And this particular assignment asked the student to define the word screencasting, list 3 instructional applications thereof, and list 2 software tools that could be used to create screencasts. And the rubric contains different levels of accomplishment, like the definition may have been complete and correct, incomplete, but not totally incorrect, or totally incorrect. And you can assign a number of points to each criterion. Each row criterion is a row, and sub numbers of how well they satisfied that criterion. So if this student was just right down the line, there was complete and correct direction, they gave 3 correct instructional applications and 2 correct tools. So bing, 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 there's their grade. You don't even have to add it up in your head. And if it's a complex grading rubric, that makes a difference. Canvas will keep track of that for you. All you have to do then is save that rubric, and that's extra feedback for the students. And it should put that grade in there. I'm not sure why that's not doing that, but you can just very quickly type the grade in to the grade box and submit the whole thing. And that grade then goes into the gradebook along with all the feedback. Let's see, there it is. It's that one right there. And now you can move on to the next one. That's how you use the speed grader in a homework assignment. Normally, you don't have to use the speed grader with a quiz, because the quizzes are graded automatically if all the questions are objective questions. But this quiz had an essay question in it, which Canvas can't grade. So I can click there and go to the speed grader. This allows me to see the student's submission and what they submitted for each question, whether they got it right or wrong. It also shows me the essay question with a blank credit box here. Here's the student's answer. They're asked to list 3 ways in which student access to Canvas Studio can be leveraged and instructed. They did 2, and they're both correct. So this would be a 2 out of 3. I can add additional comments here, just like I can to the quiz as a whole, and update the scores. And now the student has an actual grade for that quiz. If I go back to the gradebook, which is what that little icon does, there's now a grade for that quiz. Finally, the speed grader also makes it possible to efficiently grade graded discussions. This is a discussion topic where the students were asked to provide some information about what they might be able to do with screencasting as an instructional tool. My students were you all, were faculty. Let's go and see what that looks like. Please post 3 ideas for instructional applications of Camtasia in your field. Reply to 2 of your peers' posts. And here's the discussion. And I got my test students in there, and there's been a bunch of activity in that course. But in grading this, I don't want to have to go through a discussion that might have hundreds of posts in it and look for a particular student's posts and jot down on paper how they're doing and so on. The speed grader alleviates that necessity. I can go to my grades tool. I can pull up, I can find that graded discussion. Here's some ungraded activity in that. I can click on that and click on the submission button and click on the right arrow and bring up the speed grader in the same way. And what it does is it pulls all of this student, test 3 students, posts out of that long list of posts. And I can see here that the student listed the 3 things that would be useful in their field, but also replied to 2 other posts, met all the requirements. I can type that in. You can assign a rubric to this as well. It was basically all or nothing there. That wasn't much of a rubric, but there's the grade. You can add a comment in any of the ways we saw with the assignment and then submit, and that grade goes into the grade book. So it makes graded discussion topics, very quick, efficient, and easy. And that's got us to the end of the presentation. You've had some good questions along the way. We're right at 8 o'clock here, but I'm more than happy to continue answering questions if you have any more. Anything else? Anything you'd like to see again?
Is there a way?
Yes,
Is there
go
a way
ahead.
to create an assignment, and every submission will get full credit?
No. You'd have to go through and enter a default grade.
Okay. A default grade is only for non-submission.
No, it can be the default grade could be full credit.
So will that also give credit for the non-submissions?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a way
So
to
what
create?
you would do in that case would be to set
So
up,
what I want is
set up
if somebody
a
submits,
global rule that said any missing assignments get a 0. And then you could set a default grade that turned all the others to full credit automatically. So missing submissions would get a 0.
okay,
And everybody else would get the default grade, which
okay,
would be full credit.
okay.
Yeah, you're not limited to just putting in a 0 as a default grade. No, you
Okay, so I will set a deadline. So as soon as the calendar date passes the deadline, the non-submissions will become 0.
yes,
But the submitted assignment will have a special symbol, right?
correct.
And after that, let's say 12:01, I say set default value to 1. Then that will only affect the submitted entries, correct?
Correct.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
It will not, well, you don't check the box that says overwrite existing grades.
Okay.
As you mentioned earlier, you don't check that box, then it will not overwrite the zeros,
Okay.
but it will overwrite the dashes and put in whatever default grade you assign, which
Okay.
in that
Yeah,
case,
so I have to set,
in your
uh,
scenario here would be full, the full points, the full credit points.
right. Right. Okay. I got it.
That should work fine.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this for quite a while, and people have been saying it's impossible. Now I think it's possible.
I see no reason why that would not work.
Okay.
I'd test it first. but
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Okay. So you have to set 0 for missing submission,
Yeah, so you go to the, let me bring that back up.
and you set a due date.
Right. And set a due date and an available until date and make sure they're the same.
Okay.
Okay. And that should remove any ambiguity about whether whether the grade is missing or not.
Okay.
And then you just go to the late policies and
Mhm.
automatically apply a 0% for missing submissions.
And where do you set disallowing the late submission?
Right. When you set a display until date that is equal to the due date, you're disallowing late.
Oh, so it will disappear from their view.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. They can no longer access it.
Okay.
So
So 3 things.
that will set missing submission grades to 0, and then you can set the default grade as
1.
whatever, or exactly. But you can also, of course, if you're just looking for a yes, no, 1, 0 setup, you can also set up your assignment as a, let's look at an assignment here. Like if I just wanted to know whether a student had submitted the quiz or not, taken a quiz or not,
Right.
I can, actually I can't do that with a quiz. I can do it with let's say I just want to know if the student had submitted this.
Mhm.
I can edit in creating that assignment. Instead of displaying grade as points, I can display it as complete, incomplete.
Oh, okay.
Get corrects.
Okay.
Okay, so you can do the same thing you're talking about. by
So
just-
will that translate to 0s and 1s in Gradebook?
Right, exactly.
Ah, okay.
So that's another option.
Okay. So there are 2 ways to do that.
At least 2 ways to do that,
Okay.
which is not unusual in Canvas.
Complete, incomplete.
Right.
Okay.
Complete, make it a complete, incomplete assignment, a check off
Okay.
instead of a numeric.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
You bet.
Okay. I'll see you next time.
I'll look forward to it. Great
Okay.
questions. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Dave,
Hey, Helen.
I was to, one question is like JPG and JPEG, they are the
Same thing. Same thing.
They are the same.
Yeah.
And PNG, right? It's- I
PNG
want
is
the students
is
to
a
work-
so-called program network graphic.
Okay, and no problem with the Canvas, as you say, right?
No. No, both of those will work great in Canvas. There may be others you could get away with as well. I'm not sure.
I would very much appreciate if I could kind of annotate on that PNG or JPEG.
Yeah.
That would really help me out.
And indeed, when you create your assignment, if you're asking for a graphic, an image file to be submitted,
Like a picture, take a picture of your work and upload it.
right? But you can fix the assignment so that, let's see. Oh, I'm in the wrong screen, excuse me. If you're doing file upload, you can
Right,
restrict
and
file
restrict,
upload types.
right?
Allowed file extensions in that case would be JPG,
Mhm.
comma, JPEG, comma, and PNG.
Okay.
And in that event, the system won't let them upload anything else. They'll get an error when they try, and they'll
Mhm.
get an explanation that tells them, okay, you need to be uploading a JPEG or a PNG file. Indeed, if they take the picture with a phone, it's going to be one of those.
Mm,
So you
Okay.
don't really have to worry about that.
Great.
And
Thank you.
if you ever do get an image format in some way that you can't open up,
Right.
let me know. You can send it to me, and I've got some transcoding software that will convert it into something that you can use.
Awesome. Yeah. And this is my first semester using the migrated quiz, the form, from the changed from old one to new one.
Oh, you're using the new quizzes. Yeah.
This semester. And so kind of a little bit, it should be the same, right? As far as the grading goes and.
Yeah, the grading is the same. There are some issues remaining with new quizzes,
Right.
notably having to do with question banks.
Yeah, test bank, right? Question bank. Yeah, that's
If you use test banks a lot, you may have some work to do.
okay.
Your question banks from your classic quizzes question banks can be migrated to new quiz item banks, but you have to do it one at a time. And it's an involved it's about a 7-step process.
Yeah, you mentioned
It's
about
not, it's quick. Once you've done it a couple of times, it's quick to do, but it's not, if you have a lot of question banks.
If I wait about like a next semester, would that process come out kind of easier with the Canvas?
Yeah, Canvas has promised us that they will have that fixed by the time they force us to turn classic quizzes off and use new quizzes exclusively. They promise they will have fixed that so that there will be an automatic conversion when you copy your course. There'll be an automatic conversion from question banks in the one course to item banks in the new course if you select that option. But they don't have that yet.
Not yet. Okay. Yeah.
That's probably the one thing that if you use test banks a lot,
Right. Yeah.
you don't want to use new quizzes as exclusively. But remember, you can use classic quizzes and new quizzes in the same course.
Yeah. I did.
And they look the same to students. So it's not going to be a problem for the students if you do that. But if you have a test that you're going to build largely from question banks, you want to make that a classic quiz.
Okay.
But you can use new quizzes that don't utilize a lot of question bank questions by just creating them from scratch or converting one or two question banks to new quizzes, to item banks. It's like I say, they promise they're going to have that all fitted out too long.
Before 24, right?
Yeah, we're not going to be required, as it stands right now, we're not going to be required to convert completely to new quizzes until the summer of 2024.
Okay.
And and that's subject to change. They've already changed it a couple of times. So if they don't get that working, they won't force us to transition. I'm quite certain.
Okay.
So but there, on the other hand, there's some, particularly for like small quizzes and things like that, those new question types and new quizzes are so useful. The hotspot question and the categorization question, the ordering question, and so on are really handy. So you can put those in, you wouldn't have those in a question bank anyway. So you can create new quizzes with those in them and just mix them in with the classic quizzes, and the students won't know the difference.
Okay.
It's for them, the interface is almost identical to the old classic quizzes. It's just very different for you.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to it. I really enjoy attending your workshop. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy having you here, and you always have great questions. So,
and you are hours ahead, right? A couple of hours ahead, right?
No, I'm on the same
Oh, same.
time. Yeah, it's 8:13 for me, just like it is
Oh,
for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Northern Idaho, for some unknown reason, Northern Idaho is in the Pacific time zone,
Oh,
where Southern Idaho is in the Mountain time zone, and it's an
Oh,
hour
my.
earlier there. But I'm north of that line, so I'm
Same,
fine.
but different
It's
time
just
zone,
the
huh?
same for me as it is for you, so not to worry.
Okay, well, again, thank you so much and
My
have a
pleasure.
great evening. Bye-bye.
Take care.